Jack Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his wagon down the dusty trail toward Tombstone. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the barren landscape, and his old mule Bessie was breathing hard from the long journey. He had been traveling for 3 days from his small ranch outside Tucson, carrying the last of his silver dollars in a leather pouch tied to his belt. The ranch was failing. The drought had lasted 2 years now, and his cattle were dying one by one. Without a good horse to help him round up the remaining livestock and work the land properly, he would lose everything his father had built. That's why he was making this trip to Tombstone. He had heard there was a horse trader named McNeil who sold quality animals at fair prices. As the wagon rolled into town, Jack noticed how different Tombstone looked from the last time he had visited. The streets were busier, filled with miners, gamblers, and all sorts of rough characters. The silver boom had brought prosperity, but it had also brought danger. Jack kept his hand close to the Colt revolver on his hip as he navigated through the crowded Main Street. He found McNeil's stable at the edge of town, a large wooden building surrounded by corrals filled with horses of every color and size. A weathered man with gray whiskers emerged from the stable as Jack pulled up his wagon. "You must be Morrison," the man said, extending a calloused hand. "I'm Tom McNeil. Got your letter about needing a good working horse." Jack climbed down from his wagon and shook the man's hand. "Yes, sir. I need something strong and reliable. My ranch depends on it." McNeil led him through the corrals, showing him various horses. There were sleek racing horses, sturdy draft animals, and everything in between. But none of them felt right to Jack. They were either too expensive, too old, or just didn't have the spirit he was looking for. "I've got one more you might like," McNeil said, leading Jack to a separate corral behind the stable. "He's a bit wild, though. Apache horse. Came from a raid last month." In the corral stood a magnificent black stallion with white markings on his legs. The horse was powerful and proud, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through a man's soul. But Jack could see the sadness there too, and the wildness that came from being taken from his home. "The cavalry brought him in after they hit an Apache camp up north," McNeil explained. "Said there was some trouble with a war party that had been raiding settlements. This horse belonged to one of them." Jack watched the stallion move around the corral. Despite being captive, the animal held his head high and moved with grace and power. This was the horse he needed, but something about McNeil's story didn't sit right with him. "How much?" Jack asked. $50, McNeil replied. "But I'm warning you, he's not broken proper. Might take weeks to get a saddle on him, if ever." Jack looked at his remaining money. $50 was most of what he had left, but he couldn't afford to go home empty-handed. "I'll take him." As they completed the transaction, Jack noticed a woman watching them from across the street. She was Apache, dressed in a simple brown dress that looked like it had been given to her by missionaries or townspeople. Her long black hair was braided, and her dark eyes never left the stallion in the corral. After McNeil left to get the papers, Jack approached the woman. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 25, with high cheekbones and a proud bearing despite her obvious poverty. "You know this horse?" Jack asked gently. The woman looked at him with suspicion at first, then nodded slowly. "Thunder Walker," she said in careful English. "My husband's horse." Jack felt his stomach drop. "Your husband?" "Dead," she said simply. "Soldiers kill him 2 weeks past. Take his horse, burn our camp." Jack looked back at the magnificent stallion, then at the woman. Her clothes were worn and patched, and he could see she was thin from not eating enough. She had probably come to town hoping to find work or charity, and instead had found her dead husband's horse being sold like any other piece of property. "I'm sorry for your loss," Jack said, meaning it. "What's your name?" "Maria," she replied. "Missionaries give me this name when I was child." Jack introduced himself and explained why he needed the horse. Maria listened without expression, but he could see the pain in her eyes every time she looked at Thunder Walker. "I understand you need the horse," she said finally. "But he will not work for you." Apache horses, they choose their riders. Thunder Walker, he only worked for my husband because they understood each other. Jack considered this. He had heard stories about Apache horses and their loyalty, but he had dismissed them as tall tales. Looking at Thunder Walker now, though, he began to wonder if there might be some truth to them. Maybe you could help me, Jack suggested. You understand the horse. I need someone to help on the ranch anyway, and I could use someone who knows horses. Maria stared at him for a long moment. You want Apache woman to work your ranch? White men in this town, they not like that. I don't much care what they think, Jack replied honestly. I need help, and you need work. Seems like a fair trade to me. Before Maria could answer, 3 men approached them from across the street. Jack recognized the type immediately. They were the kind of men who came to boom towns looking for easy money and trouble. The leader was a tall, thin man with a scraggly beard and cold eyes. His companions were shorter but looked just as mean. Well, the leader said, stopping a few feet away. What do we have here? A white man talking to a dirty Apache squaw? Jack stepped slightly in front of Maria. Move along, friend. This doesn't concern you. The man laughed nastily. Everything that happens in this town concerns me, especially when it involves Indian trash. He looked at Maria with disgust. You should be on a reservation with the rest of your kind, not spreading your filth around decent white folks. Jack's hand moved closer to his gun. I said move along. Or what? The man sneered. You gonna draw on me over some Apache whore? Hell, her whole family probably got what they deserved from the cavalry. That was enough. Jack's fist connected with the man's jaw before anyone could react. The man stumbled backward, blood flowing from his split lip. You son of a bitch, the man yelled, reaching for his gun. Jack was faster. His Colt was out and pointed at the man's chest before the troublemaker had even cleared leather. The man's companions froze, their hands hovering over their own weapons. I suggest you 3 find somewhere else to be, Jack said quietly. Right now. The leader wiped blood from his mouth and glared at Jack with pure hatred. This ain't over, Morrison. Word travels fast in a small town. You'll regret taking sides with Indian trash. Maybe, Jack replied, not lowering his gun. But you'll regret it more if you don't start walking. The 3 men backed away, but Jack could see the promise of future trouble in their eyes. Once they were gone, he holstered his weapon and turned to Maria. I'm sorry about that, he said. Maria looked at him with something that might have been respect. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did, Jack replied firmly. No one deserves to be talked to that way. They were interrupted by Tom McNeil returning with the papers for Thunder Walker. The horse trader had witnessed the confrontation and looked nervous. Morrison, I don't want any trouble at my place, McNeil said. Maybe you should take your business elsewhere. The deal's done, Jack replied, handing over the money. I paid for the horse, and I'm taking him. As McNeil reluctantly completed the paperwork, Jack turned back to Maria. My offer still stands. I could use help with the ranch, and you know more about this horse than anyone. Maria looked at Thunder Walker, then back at Jack. If I come with you, those men will make trouble. They will not forget what happened here today. Let them come, Jack said. I've dealt with troublemakers before. You do not understand, Maria said seriously. That man, he is Colt Brennan. He works for big rancher named Harrison Webb. Webb, he wants all small ranchers gone so he can take their land. If Brennan tells Webb you help Apache woman, Webb will use that against you. Jack absorbed this information. He had heard of Harrison Webb, a powerful cattle baron who had been buying up failing ranches throughout the territory. If Webb was involved, things could get complicated quickly. All the more reason to have someone watching my back, Jack said. And someone who can help me gentle this horse properly. Maria considered this for several minutes while Jack loaded his few supplies into the wagon. Finally, she nodded. I will come, she said. But, when trouble comes, and it will come, you may wish you had never met me. We'll face whatever comes together, Jack replied. As they prepared to leave town with Thunder Walker tied behind the wagon, Jack noticed several men watching them from various doorways and windows. Word was already spreading about the confrontation with Brennan and his men. Jack knew Maria was right, trouble was coming. But, looking at the proud Apache woman sitting beside him and the magnificent stallion following behind them, he felt like he had made the right choice. The sun was beginning to set as they left Tombstone behind, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. Thunder Walker followed the wagon without resistance, almost as if he understood that Maria was nearby. Jack hoped the horse's cooperation was a good sign for what lay ahead. "Tell me about your husband," Jack said as they traveled through the desert twilight. Maria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft with memory. "His name was Spotted Wolf. He was good man, good husband. We were married 2 years when soldiers came." She paused, looking at Thunder Walker. "He trained that horse from colt. They were like brothers." "How did you end up in Tombstone?" "After attack, I had nowhere to go. Our people scattered. Some went to reservation, some went deeper into mountains. I came to White Man's Town thinking maybe I could work, earn money for food." She laughed bitterly. "White people, they see Apache woman, they see only trouble." Jack felt a wave of sympathy for her situation. "What will you do now? I mean, after you help me with the ranch?" "I do not think that far ahead," Maria replied honestly. "Each day, I try to survive. Tomorrow, I will think about tomorrow." As they made camp that night, Jack watched Maria approach Thunder Walker. The horse, who had been skittish and hostile toward everyone else, immediately calmed in her presence. She spoke to him in Apache, her voice gentle and soothing. The stallion nuzzled her hand and allowed her to stroke his neck. "She's right about Apache horses," Jack thought to himself. "This animal knows exactly who he can trust." That night, as they sat around their small campfire, Maria told Jack more about her life. She had been born into the Apache band led by her father, a respected war chief. When she was 12, missionaries had taken her to a school where she learned English and white customs. But, after 2 years, she had escaped back to her people. "I learned white ways, but my heart stayed Apache," she explained. "When I married Spotted Wolf, I thought I could live traditional life, raise Apache children. But, white man's war came for us anyway." Jack shared his own story, how his father had built the ranch from nothing, how the drought had slowly destroyed everything they had worked for, how he was now fighting just to hold onto the land. "Maybe we can help each other survive," Jack suggested. "Maybe," Maria agreed, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The next morning brought new challenges. Thunder Walker allowed Maria to approach him and even accepted a rope halter, but when Jack tried to get near, the horse became agitated and defensive. It was clear that gaining the stallion's trust would take time and patience. They were still working with Thunder Walker when they heard horses approaching. Jack grabbed his rifle and positioned himself between the riders and Maria. 3 men crested the nearby ridge, and Jack's heart sank when he recognized Colt Brennan leading them. Well, Brennan called out as they rode into the camp. "If it isn't the Indian lover and his pet squaw." Jack kept his rifle ready. "You're a long way from town, Brennan. What do you want?" "Just thought you should know," Brennan said with a nasty smile. "Word's gotten back to Mr. Webb about your little display yesterday. He's very interested in meeting you." "I'll bet he is," Jack replied dryly. "See, Mr. Webb don't like troublemakers," Brennan continued. "And he especially don't like white men who side with Indians over their own kind. Makes him think maybe you're not the type of person who should be owning land in this territory." The threat was clear, but Jack wasn't about to back down. "Tell Mr. Webb that what I do on my own land is my business." Brennan's smile widened. "That's where you're wrong, Morrison. Everything that happens in this territory is Mr. Webb's business. And, right now, you're making yourself a very big problem." One of Brennan's men was eyeing Thunder Walker with obvious interest. "Boss, look at that horse. That's prime Apache stock right there. Indeed it is, Brennan agreed. Funny thing about stolen Indian property, sometimes it needs to be returned to its rightful owners. And sometimes those rightful owners turn out to be upstanding white citizens who can prove ownership. Jack felt anger rising in his chest. That horse was bought legally from Tom McNeil. Was it? Brennan asked mockingly. McNeil's been known to deal in stolen goods. Wouldn't surprise me if that bill of sale turns out to be fraudulent. Before Jack could respond, Maria stepped forward. She had been silent during the entire exchange, but now she looked directly at Brennan with no fear in her eyes. You want horse? She asked calmly. Come take him. Brennan laughed. Well, the squaw's got spirit. I'll give her that. But his laughter died when Maria whistled softly. Thunder Walker immediately came to her side, and she vaulted onto his back with fluid grace. The stallion responded to her touch like they were two parts of the same creature. This horse, he knows his people, Maria said from Thunder Walker's back. White men can steal him, sell him, but he will never truly belong to them. To demonstrate her point, she guided Thunder Walker through a series of movements that showed the incredible bond between horse and rider. The stallion responded to the slightest touch, turning, stopping, and moving as if he could read her thoughts. Brennan's expression had turned ugly. Get down from that horse, squaw, before I drag you down. Maria remained mounted, her eyes never leaving Brennan's face. You are welcome to try. The tension in the camp was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack kept his rifle trained on Brennan while the gunman's companions spread out slightly, looking for better positions. This is your last warning, Morrison, Brennan said finally. Get rid of the Indian woman and stay out of Mr. Webb's way, or you'll regret it. The only thing I regret, Jack replied, is not shooting you yesterday when I had the chance. Brennan's hand moved toward his gun, but Jack was ready. Go ahead, Jack said quietly. Give me a reason. For a moment, it seemed like violence was inevitable. Then, Brennan seemed to think better of it. He was fast with a gun, but Jack had the advantage of a rifle and good cover. This ain't over, Brennan snarled, wheeling his horse around. Not by a long shot. As the three men rode away, Jack lowered his rifle and looked at Maria, who was still mounted on Thunder Walker. That was either very brave or very foolish, he told her. Sometimes they are the same thing, Maria replied, sliding down from the horse's back. Jack knew Brennan was right about one thing, this definitely wasn't over. By helping Maria and standing up to Webb's men, he had made himself a target. But, as he watched Maria gentle Thunder Walker and prepare for the day's travel, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choices. They broke camp quickly and continued toward Jack's ranch. The land gradually became more familiar as they traveled, and Jack felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as they approached his home. Relief at being back on his own territory, but apprehension about what kind of reception awaited them. The ranch house was small but well-built, constructed of adobe and wood with a red tile roof that Jack's father had insisted on. The barn was larger than the house, designed to shelter livestock during the harsh desert storms. A windmill pumped water into a large tank, though the level was lower than Jack would have liked. It's not much, Jack admitted as they pulled up to the house. It is more than I have had for weeks, Maria replied practically. As they unloaded the wagon, Jack showed Maria around the property. The drought had taken a heavy toll, the grassland was brown and sparse, and many of the water sources had dried up completely. Only about 30 head of cattle remained from what had once been a herd of over 100. The land, it is sick, Maria observed, kneeling to examine the dry soil. 2 years without proper rain, Jack explained. My father always said this was good grazing land, but he never saw a drought like this. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maria asked about Jack's plans. If the drought breaks this year, I might be able to save the ranch, Jack said. But I need to round up the cattle that have wandered off, repair the water systems, and somehow make it through until the rains come. And if drought does not break? Jack was quiet for a moment. Then, I lose everything and start over somewhere else. Where would you go? I don't know. Maybe California, maybe Oregon. Somewhere it rains more than once a year. Maria nodded thoughtfully. Apache people, we know about losing everything, about starting over. Sometimes the land tells you it is time to move on. Is that what the land is telling you? Land tells me many things, Maria replied cryptically. But, first, we must listen. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Jack worked on repairing fences and equipment while Maria spent time with Thunder Walker, gradually introducing the horse to saddle and bridle. Her patience and understanding of the animal's nature made progress that Jack never could have achieved alone. But their peaceful routine was shattered when Jack rode out to check on his cattle and found something that made his blood run cold. 5 of his remaining steers were dead, shot and left to rot in the sun. This wasn't the work of wolves or natural predators, someone had deliberately killed his livestock. When he returned to the ranch house and told Maria what he had found, her face grew grim. Webb's men, she said simply. Maybe. But I can't prove it. You do not need proof, Maria replied. You know truth. Question is, what will you do about it? Jack considered his options. He could ride to town and report the incident to the sheriff, but everyone knew Sheriff Martinez was in Webb's pocket. He could try to catch the perpetrators in the act, but that would likely mean a gunfight he wasn't sure he could win. Right now, I'm going to bury those cattle and keep a closer watch on the rest, Jack decided. But he knew this was just the beginning. Webb was applying pressure, testing to see how Jack would respond. And, based on what Jack had seen of Colt Brennan and his men, things were likely to get much worse before they got better. The next morning brought fresh trouble. Jack woke to find his water tank had been damaged during the night. Someone had punched holes in the metal sides, and precious water was streaming out onto the dry ground. The windmill was still turning, but it couldn't pump water fast enough to replace what was being lost. Damn it, Jack muttered as he examined the damage. The holes were too clean to be accidental, someone had used an awl or sharp knife to puncture the tank in multiple places. Maria emerged from the small room Jack had given her in the back of the house. She took one look at the situation and shook her head. They want to drive you off the land, she said. Without water, you cannot keep cattle. Jack nodded grimly. He had patching materials in the barn, but repairs would take time, and he would need to drain the tank first. That meant his cattle would have to go without fresh water for at least a day, maybe 2. Help me get some buckets, he told Maria. We need to save what water we can before it all leaks out. They worked quickly, filling every container they could find with water from the damaged tank. Thunder Walker watched their frantic activity with intelligent eyes, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. As they worked, Jack noticed dust clouds on the horizon, riders approaching from the direction of town. His heart sank when he counted at least 6 horses. Too many to be a friendly visit. Get inside, he told Maria. Take Thunder Walker into the barn. I will not hide, Maria replied firmly. This isn't about hiding, Jack said urgently. If shooting starts, I need you safe. And I need that horse protected. Maria looked like she wanted to argue, but the sound of approaching horses convinced her. She quickly led Thunder Walker into the barn while Jack grabbed his rifle and took cover behind the water tank. The riders came to a halt about 50 yards from the house. Jack recognized Colt Brennan immediately, but the other men were strangers. They looked like hired guns, the kind of men who sold their shooting skills to whoever paid the most. Morning, Morrison. Brennan called out cheerfully. Seems you're having some water problems. Nothing I can't handle, Jack replied, keeping his rifle ready. That's good to hear, Brennan said with mock concern. Because Mr. Webb would hate to see you lose your ranch over something as simple as a water shortage. One of the hired guns was eyeing the house with professional interest. Nice little spread, he commented loudly. Shame if something happened to it. Jack felt anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. These men wanted him to lose his temper and do something stupid. What do you want, Brennan? Jack asked. Well, since you asked, Brennan replied, dismounting from his horse. Mr. Webb has decided to make you a generous offer for your land. He's prepared to pay you fair market value, even in its current drought-damaged condition." "How generous of him," Jack said dryly. "But the ranch isn't for sale." "See, that's where you're wrong," Brennan said, walking closer. "Everything's for sale, Morrison. It's just a matter of finding the right price." "And what if I don't want to sell at any price?" Brennan smiled coldly. "Then, you might find ranch life gets a lot more difficult. Accidents happen, you know. Water tanks get damaged, cattle wander off or get sick, buildings catch fire. It's a dangerous business, ranching." The threat was clear, but Jack wasn't about to be intimidated. "Are you threatening me, Brennan?" "Me?" "No, sir," Brennan replied with exaggerated innocence. "I'm just pointing out the risks of the ranching business. Especially for someone who doesn't have the support of his neighbors." "I don't need support from neighbors like Webb." "Maybe not," Brennan agreed. "But you do need support from the law. And Sheriff Martinez has some concerns about your association with that Apache woman." Jack's grip tightened on his rifle. "What kind of concerns?" "Well, there are laws about harboring fugitive Indians," Brennan explained casually. "And some folks think that woman might be connected to the recent Apache raids up north." "That's ridiculous," Jack snapped. "She's never hurt anyone." Maybe not," Brennan said with a shrug. "But appearances matter. A white man living with an Apache woman, especially one whose husband was killed in a military action, well, it raises questions about loyalty." One of the hired guns had dismounted and was examining Jack's barn with obvious interest. "Boss," he called out, "you might want to see this." Brennan walked over to where his man was standing. They were looking at tracks in the dirt, the distinctive hoofprints of an unshod horse. Well, Brennan said loudly enough for Jack to hear. "Looks like someone's been riding an Indian pony around here. Sheriff Martinez is going to find that very interesting." Jack realized they were talking about Thunder Walker's tracks. Apache horses were often left unshod, and an experienced tracker could tell the difference. "That horse was legally purchased," Jack called out. "Was it?" Brennan asked, walking back toward the house. "From what I hear, Tom McNeil's been known to deal in stolen property. Wouldn't surprise me if that bill of sale turns out to be fraudulent." "You know damn well it's not fraudulent." Maybe not," Brennan replied. "But it'll be interesting to see what Sheriff Martinez thinks when he investigates the matter." Jack was beginning to understand the trap being set for him. Webb's men would claim Thunder Walker was stolen property, use that as evidence that Jack was dealing with hostile Indians, and then use both issues to justify seizing his land for public safety. "You've made your point," Jack said. "Now get off my property." "Oh, we're not done yet," Brennan said with a nasty smile. "You see, Mr. Webb asked us to deliver a message. He wants to meet with you tomorrow evening. Sunset, at the old Spanish Mission ruins about 10 miles south of town." "And if I don't show up?" "Then, he'll assume you're not interested in resolving this situation peacefully," Brennan replied ominously. Jack considered his options. Meeting with Webb was risky, it could easily be a trap. But not meeting with him might provoke an all-out attack on the ranch. "I'll think about it," Jack said finally. "You do that," Brennan agreed. "But don't think too long. Mr. Webb is not a patient man." As the riders prepared to leave, Brennan called out one final warning. "Oh, and, Morrison? If I were you, I'd send that Apache woman away before our next visit. Some of my men have strong feelings about Indians, and I can't guarantee their behavior if she's still here." After the riders disappeared over the ridge, Maria emerged from the barn leading Thunder Walker. "I heard everything," she said simply. "I'm sorry they threatened you," Jack replied. "But I won't let them drive you away." "This is not about me," Maria said seriously. "This is about your land, your life. Webb, he wants you gone, and he will use any excuse to take what you have." Jack nodded. He was beginning to understand the full scope of Webb's operation. The cattle baron wasn't just buying up failing ranches, he was actively working to make them fail. "What do you think I should do?" Jack asked. Maria considered the question carefully. "Among my people, when enemy is too strong to fight directly, sometimes we must be clever like coyote instead of brave like wolf." Meaning? Meaning sometimes running away is not defeat. Sometimes it is strategy. Jack looked around at his father's ranch, the house they had built together, the barn where he had learned to work with horses, the land that held so many memories. The thought of abandoning it all made him sick. "I can't just give up," he said. "Not give up," Maria corrected. "But maybe not fight battle you cannot win." That afternoon, they worked together to repair the water tank. The damage was extensive, and they had to use almost all of Jack's metalworking supplies to patch the holes. While they worked, Maria told Jack more about Apache survival tactics. "My people, we learned long ago that sometimes the land itself will fight for you," she explained. "But you must understand the land first." "What do you mean?" "This desert, it has moods, like person. Sometimes it is angry, sometimes peaceful. Right now, it is testing you." Jack wasn't sure he believed in such mystical concepts, but he had to admit the drought felt almost personal sometimes. "What would your people do in a situation like this?" he asked. "We would look for signs," Maria replied. "Animals know things before people do. Plants tell stories if you know how to read them." As if to illustrate her point, she pointed to a small lizard that had appeared on a nearby rock. "Gecko comes out in afternoon. That means rain is coming within 3 days." Jack looked at the cloudless sky skeptically. "You're sure about that?" "Animals do not lie," Maria said confidently. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jack made a decision. "I'm going to meet with Webb tomorrow," he announced. Maria looked concerned. "That could be dangerous." "Everything's dangerous now," Jack replied. "But maybe if I talk to him face to face, I can find out what he really wants." "What he wants is your land," Maria said bluntly. "Maybe. But maybe there's something else. Some way to resolve this without more violence." Maria shook her head. "Men like Webb, they do not negotiate. They take what they want." "Well, I have to try something," Jack said. "I can't just sit here waiting for them to destroy everything." That night, Jack lay awake thinking about his options. He could try to fight Webb's men, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He could abandon the ranch and start over somewhere else, but that felt like surrender. Or he could try to find some middle ground, some way to keep his land without constantly looking over his shoulder. The next day passed slowly. Jack spent the morning checking on his remaining cattle and making sure his fences were secure. Maria worked with Thunder Walker, and Jack was amazed at the progress they had made. The horse was now accepting a saddle and bridle, though he still wouldn't let Jack ride him. "He is learning to trust," Maria explained. "But Apache horses, they are careful about who they accept." As the afternoon wore on, Jack prepared for his meeting with Webb. He cleaned his revolver and rifle, made sure he had plenty of ammunition, and wrote a letter explaining the situation in case something happened to him. "I don't like this," Maria said as Jack prepared to leave. "Neither do I," Jack admitted. "But I don't see any other choice." "There is always choice," Maria replied. "Question is whether you can live with consequences." As Jack mounted his old horse and prepared to ride out, Maria approached with something in her hand. "Apache Lucky Charm," she said, offering him a small carved stone. "My grandmother made it. It protected my husband in many battles." "I can't take this," Jack protested. "It's too important." "That is why you must take it," Maria insisted. "Your fight is my fight now. Apache luck, it might help white man too." Jack accepted the charm and tucked it into his shirt pocket. As he rode away from the ranch, he could see Maria watching him from the porch, with Thunder Walker standing beside her like a faithful guardian. The old Spanish mission was about an hour's ride south of the ranch. It had been abandoned for 50 years, its adobe walls crumbling under the relentless desert sun. Jack had played there as a child, exploring the ruined rooms and imagining the lives of the people who had once worshipped there. Now, as the sun began to set, the ruins took on a more sinister appearance. Jack approached carefully, his hand never far from his gun. Webb could have a dozen men hidden in the rubble, waiting to ambush him. But, when Jack reached the mission, he found only one man waiting for him. Harrison Webb was a large, imposing figure with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself with the authority of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Mr. Morrison," Webb said cordially as Jack dismounted. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Webb," Jack replied cautiously. "I have to say, this is an unusual place for a business meeting." Webb smiled. "I've always found that important conversations require the right atmosphere. Besides, this place has historical significance." Jack looked around at the crumbling walls. "How so?" "This mission was built by Spanish priests who thought they could civilize the Apache," Webb explained. "They lasted about 10 years before the Indians burned them out." "And the point of that story is?" "The point," Webb said, his smile disappearing, "is that some people refuse to accept civilization. They prefer to live like savages, following old ways that have no place in a modern world." Jack began to understand where this conversation was heading. "If you're talking about Maria, she's not a savage. She's a good person who's had some bad luck." "Is she?" Webb asked. "Do you really know anything about this woman? Do you know what her husband did during his raids? How many innocent settlers he killed?" "I know she's not responsible for what other people did," Jack replied firmly. "Aren't you curious about why she was the only survivor when the cavalry hit that Apache camp?" Webb pressed. "Don't you wonder why they let her live when they killed all the others?" Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't thought about that question before. "Maybe she just got lucky," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe," Webb suggested, "she made a deal with the army. Maybe she provided information about Apache movements in exchange for her life." "That's speculation," Jack said, but doubt was beginning to creep into his mind. "Is it?" Webb asked. "Think about it, Morrison. An Apache woman shows up in town just days after her people are attacked. She speaks English better than most Indians. She knows exactly how to approach a lonely white man who needs help with his ranch." Jack's hand moved instinctively to his gun. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you might want to be more careful about who you trust," Webb replied smoothly. "Apache warriors have a saying, sometimes the deadliest enemy is the one who sleeps in your lodge." Despite his doubts about Webb's motives, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there might be some truth to what the man was saying. Maria had appeared in his life at a very convenient time, and she did seem to know more about horses and survival than most Apache women he had heard about. "Even if that were true," Jack said slowly, "it doesn't change the fact that you're trying to steal my land." Webb laughed. "Steal? That's a harsh word. I prefer to think of it as consolidation. Small ranchers like you are struggling to survive, while I have the resources to make this land productive again." "The drought will break eventually," Jack said. "Maybe," Webb agreed. "But even if it does, you don't have enough cattle left to rebuild your herd. You don't have enough money to repair your infrastructure. And you certainly don't have enough political influence to protect yourself from complications." "What kind of complications?" Webb's expression grew serious. "The kind that come from harboring fugitive Indians. The territorial government is very concerned about Apache activity in this area. If they decided you were providing aid to hostile Indians, they could seize your land under the Public Safety Act." Jack realized this was the real threat. Webb wasn't just using intimidation and sabotage, he was prepared to use legal maneuvers to steal the ranch. "Maria isn't a fugitive," Jack protested. "Isn't she?" Webb asked. "Can you prove she wasn't involved in the raids? Can you prove she didn't escape from a reservation? Because if you can't, the territorial authorities might decide she needs to be relocated for everyone's safety." The trap was even more sophisticated than Jack had realized. Webb could have Maria arrested as a fugitive, use that arrest as evidence that Jack was harboring dangerous Indians, and, then, petition the territorial government to seize the ranch for public safety reasons. "What do you want?" Jack asked finally. "I want to make a deal," Webb replied. "You sell me your land for a fair price, and I'll make sure no one asks any awkward questions about your Indian friend." "And if I refuse?" Webb's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it. "Then, I'm afraid things might get very complicated for both of you." Jack considered his options. Webb clearly had more resources, more influence, and more men than he could fight. But selling the ranch meant abandoning everything his father had built. "I need time to think about it," Jack said finally. Of course, Webb agreed. "But don't take too long. The territorial authorities are planning a sweep for fugitive Indians next week. It would be unfortunate if your friend got caught up in that." As Jack rode back to his ranch in the gathering darkness, his mind was churning with doubts and fears. Was Maria really just an innocent victim, or was there more to her story? Could he trust her, or was Webb right about her motives? When he arrived at the ranch, he found Maria waiting on the porch with Thunder Walker beside her. "How did it go?" she asked. Jack looked at her carefully, trying to read her expression in the moonlight. "Webb made me an offer for the land. And he also told me some things about you," Jack said slowly. "Things that made me wonder if I really know who you are." Maria's expression didn't change, but Jack thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. "What kind of things?" she asked quietly. "He suggested you might not be as innocent as you seem. That maybe you survived the cavalry attack because you made a deal with the army." For a long moment, Maria said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "There are things about me you do not know," she admitted. "Things I have not told you." Jack felt his heart sink. "What kind of things?" Maria looked out at the desert, then back at Jack. "If I tell you truth, you may not want me to stay." "Try me," Jack said, though he wasn't sure he really wanted to hear what she had to say. Maria took a deep breath. "My husband, Spotted Wolf, he was not just warrior. He was war chief, leader of raids against white settlements." Jack absorbed this information. "Go on." "I knew about raids. Sometimes, I helped plan them. I knew which ranches had few defenders, which trails were safe for escape." Jack felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "Did you kill anyone?" "No," Maria said firmly. "I never killed, never hurt anyone. But I provided information." "What happened during the cavalry attack?" Jack asked. Maria was quiet for a long time. "The night before attack, Army Scout came to our camp under white flag. He offered deal if someone provided information about warchief activities, that person would be spared when soldiers came." "And you took the deal?" "No," Maria said, surprising Jack. "But my husband's brother did. He was jealous of Spotted Wolf's position, wanted to be war chief himself. He told soldiers where to find our camp, when guards would be changed." "Then, how did you survive?" "When attack came, my husband sent me into hills to escape. He knew someone had betrayed us, but he did not know who. He made me promise to survive, to remember him." Jack tried to process this information. "So you didn't betray your people?" "Not to Army," Maria replied. "But, when I came to Tombstone, when I was hungry and desperate, I talked to wrong people." "What do you mean?" Maria looked ashamed. "Man named Patterson, he worked for Land Office. He asked questions about Apache movements, about which areas might be safe for white settlers. I was hungry, needed money for food. I told him some things about traditional Apache camping areas, hunting grounds." Jack felt relieved that Maria hadn't directly betrayed her husband, but worried about the implications of what she had told him. "Did you tell this Patterson about my ranch?" "No," Maria said quickly. "I never mentioned you or your land. But, if Webb knows about Patterson, he might think I am still providing information." Jack realized that Webb's suspicions weren't entirely unfounded, even if his conclusions were wrong. Maria had been desperate enough to sell information once, who was to say she wouldn't do it again? Is there anything else I should know? Jack asked. One more thing, Maria said reluctantly. The horse, Thunderwalker, he was not just my husband's horse. He was trained as war horse, taught to fight alongside Apache warriors. Jack looked at the magnificent stallion standing quietly in the moonlight. It was hard to imagine the gentle animal as a weapon of war. What does that mean for us? Jack asked. It means if wrong people recognize him, they will know he comes from Warrior Band. It will support Webb's claims about me. Jack sat down heavily on the porch steps. Every piece of information seemed to make his situation more complicated. What do you want to do? He asked Maria. I want to help you keep your land, she replied. But maybe my presence here makes that impossible. Maybe, Jack agreed reluctantly. But running away won't solve anything either. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. Finally, Maria spoke again. There is one thing that might help, she said slowly. What? Apache people, we know this desert better than white men. We know secret places, hidden water sources, trails that army cannot follow. If we must fight, we can fight like Apache instead of like white ranchers. Jack considered this suggestion. Conventional warfare against Webb's superior numbers would be suicide. But guerrilla tactics, using knowledge of the terrain and the element of surprise, might level the playing field. That would mean giving up any pretense of following the law, Jack said. White man's law has not protected you so far, Maria pointed out. True, Jack admitted. But once we start down that path, there's no going back. There is no going back anyway, Maria replied. Webb will not stop until he has what he wants. As they talked late into the night, Jack found himself seriously considering Maria's suggestion. If conventional methods wouldn't work, maybe it was time to try something unconventional. But first, he needed to know if he could truly trust her. Why are you willing to help me? He asked. You could just disappear into the desert, start over somewhere else. Maria looked at him seriously. Because you stood up for me when others would not. Because you treated me like person, not like enemy. And because. She paused, as if struggling with the words. Because I think my husband would want me to help good man fight for his land. Jack studied her face in the moonlight, looking for any sign of deception. All he saw was sincerity and determination. All right, he said finally. If we're going to do this, we need a plan. Maria smiled for the first time since he had returned from meeting Webb. Apache always have plan. The plan Maria outlined was unlike anything Jack had ever considered. Instead of defending the ranch directly, they would use the desert itself as their weapon. She knew hidden water sources that could sustain them for weeks, caves that could shelter them from pursuit, and ancient Apache trails that no white man had ever mapped. First, we must move cattle to safe place, Maria explained, sketching a rough map in the dirt with a stick. There is Box Canyon about 20 miles north, hidden behind red rocks. Apache used it for winter camping. Good water, good grass, easy to defend. Jack studied her crude map. The area she was describing was on his property, but he had never explored it thoroughly. How do you know about this place? My father's band used it many seasons, Maria replied. Before white men came to this territory. If we move the cattle there, Webb's men will just track them down, Jack pointed out. Maria shook her head. Not if we are clever. Apache way is to make enemy think you are one place when you are really in another. Over the next 2 days, they prepared for what Maria called the vanishing. They gathered supplies, studied the terrain, and, most importantly, worked with Thunderwalker to prepare him for what lay ahead. Warhorse must be ready for anything, Maria explained as she put the stallion through complex maneuvers. He must move silent like shadow, respond to touch like ghost. Jack was amazed at the transformation in Thunderwalker. Under Maria's guidance, the horse had become something extraordinary, part transportation, part weapon, and part partner. The animal could move almost silently across rocky ground, respond to commands given by pressure from Maria's knees, and even lie down on command to avoid detection. "Your husband trained him well," Jack observed. Spotted Wolf said horse and rider must think like one creature, Maria replied. In Apache way, horse is not tool. Horse is brother. On the third day, their preparation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Martinez and 3 deputies. Jack recognized the setup immediately. This was the sweep for fugitive Indians that Webb had warned him about. "Morning, Morrison," Sheriff Martinez called out as the lawman rode into the ranch yard. "We need to have a word with you." Jack emerged from the barn, trying to look relaxed while his mind raced. He had sent Maria and Thunder Walker to a hiding spot in the rocks about a mile away, but if the lawmen searched the area thoroughly, they might find them. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" Jack asked. "We're investigating reports of Apache activity in this area," Martinez replied, dismounting from his horse. "Someone claimed they saw Indian sign around your ranch." "Indian sign?" Jack asked innocently. "What kind of sign?" "Unshod horse tracks, campfire remains, that sort of thing," Martinez said, walking around the ranch yard with obvious purpose. "Mind if we take a look around?" Jack knew he couldn't refuse without arousing more suspicion. "Help yourself, Sheriff. Though I should mention, I did buy a horse from Tom McNeil a few days ago." "Apache horse, so it's unshod." "That's interesting," Martinez said, examining the ground near the barn. "Where's this horse now?" "Out in the pasture with my other animals," Jack replied smoothly. One of the deputies had found the tracks Maria had mentioned, clear hoofprints from Thunder Walker's unshod feet. "Sheriff, take a look at this." Martinez examined the tracks carefully. "These look fresh. And there's something else." He knelt down and picked up a few strands of long black hair that had caught on a fence post. Jack's heart sank. Maria must have brushed against the fence when they were preparing to hide Thunder Walker. "Looks like Indian hair to me," Martinez said, holding up the strands. "You sure you haven't seen any Apache around here, Morrison?" "I told you, Sheriff. Just me and the horses," Jack replied, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. "Aha," Martinez said skeptically. "Well, we're going to need to search the property more thoroughly." "You won't mind if we take a ride around, check the outlying areas?" This was exactly what Jack had been afraid of. If the deputies searched systematically, they would eventually find Maria's hiding place. "Actually, Sheriff," Jack said, thinking quickly, "I've got work to do in town today. Why don't I ride along with you, show you the boundaries of my property? Save you some time." Martinez studied Jack's face suspiciously. "Why would you want to do that?" "Well, I figure the sooner you satisfy yourself that there's nothing here, the sooner you can move on to more important business," Jack replied. After some discussion, Martinez agreed to the arrangement. Jack saddled his horse and led the lawman on a tour of his property that carefully avoided the area where Maria was hiding. He showed them the legitimate hoofprints from his cattle and horses, explained the various landmarks, and generally tried to appear cooperative and innocent. But, as they rode, Jack noticed that one of the deputies, a young man named Collins, kept looking toward the rocky hills where Maria was concealed. "Something interesting over there, Collins?" Jack asked casually. "Just thought I saw something move," Collins replied. "Probably just a deer or something." Jack's blood ran cold. Had Collins spotted Maria or Thunder Walker? Or was he just being paranoid? "Lots of wildlife in these hills," Jack said, trying to sound unconcerned. "Mountain lions, deer, even a few elk." "Maybe we should take a closer look," Collins suggested to the sheriff. "Maybe we should," Martinez agreed, turning his horse toward the hills. Jack knew he had to do something to distract them. As they approached the rocky outcropping where Maria was hiding, he made a decision that could either save them or get them both killed. "Sheriff," Jack said suddenly, "before we go up there, there's something I should tell you about Harrison Webb." Martinez reined in his horse. "What about Webb?" "He's been pressuring me to sell my ranch," Jack explained. "When I refused, his men started sabotaging my property." damaged my water tank, killed some of my cattle. Those are serious accusations, Morrison, Martinez said. You got any proof? I've got witnesses to some of it, Jack lied smoothly. But, more importantly, I think this whole Indian scare is just Webb's way of getting you to harass me into selling. Martinez looked uncomfortable. Jack could see the sheriff was caught between his loyalty to Webb and his duty to investigate legitimate complaints. Why didn't you report these incidents when they happened? Martinez asked. Because I figured you wouldn't believe me, Jack replied honestly. Everyone knows Webb has influence in this county. Collins was still looking toward the hills, but Martinez seemed more interested in Jack's allegations about Webb. You're suggesting that Mr. Webb would file false reports about Apache activity? Martinez asked. I'm suggesting that Mr. Webb wants my land, and he's not too particular about how he gets it, Jack replied. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching from behind them. Jack turned to see Colt Brennan and two of his men riding toward them. Sheriff Martinez. Brennan called out. Any luck finding that Apache woman? Jack felt his stomach drop. Brennan's casual mention of an Apache woman proved that this wasn't just a random sweep, they were specifically looking for Maria. Still searching, Martinez replied. Morrison here was just showing us around his property. Brennan looked at Jack with obvious suspicion. Is that so? Well, maybe we can help speed things up. My boys know this area pretty well. That's not necessary, Jack said quickly. Oh, I think it is, Brennan replied with a nasty smile. After all, we're all concerned citizens here. We want to make sure no dangerous Indians are hiding on your property. One of Brennan's men had dismounted and was examining the ground more carefully than the deputies had. Boss, he called out, I'm seeing tracks here that don't match Morrison's cattle or horses. Jack realized they were looking at Thunder Walker's distinctive hoof prints. The tracks were too clean and too purposeful to belong to a wild horse. What kind of tracks? Martinez asked, riding over to look. Indian war horse, the tracker replied confidently. Unshod, but trained for mounted combat. See how the stride is controlled, how the horse placed his feet to avoid loose rocks. That's not natural horse behavior. Jack knew they were in serious trouble now. If Brennan's tracker was that good, he would eventually follow Thunder Walker's trail straight to Maria's hiding place. Interesting, Martinez said, studying the tracks. Morrison, you said you bought this horse from Tom McNeil? That's right, Jack replied. Tom. Brennan called out suddenly. What do you know about a horse Morrison bought from you? Jack turned to see Tom McNeil riding up with two more men. The horse trader looked nervous and kept avoiding Jack's eyes. I sold him an Apache horse, McNeil admitted reluctantly. But I told him it was half wild, might never take to saddle properly. And where exactly did you get this Apache horse? Martinez asked. McNeil looked at Brennan, then back at the sheriff. From the cavalry, after that raid up north. They brought in several horses from the Apache camp they hit. The same raid where all the Apache were killed except for one woman? Brennan asked pointedly. I wouldn't know about that, McNeil stammered. But Jack could see where this was heading. They were building a case that connected Thunder Walker to Maria, and Maria to the Apache raids. Sheriff, Jack said desperately, even if this horse did come from an Apache camp, that doesn't prove anything. I bought him legally, with a bill of sale. Maybe, Martinez replied. But it does raise questions about why an Apache warhorse would be here on your ranch, especially when we've got reports of a fugitive Apache woman in the area. Brennan's tracker had continued following Thunder Walker's trail, and Jack could see they were getting dangerously close to Maria's hiding place. Sheriff, Jack said, making another desperate gambit, I think we need to talk about what's really going on here. And what's that? Martinez asked. I think Harrison Webb is using you and your deputies to do his dirty work, Jack said loudly enough for everyone to hear. He wants my land, so he's manufacturing evidence of Apache activity to justify seizing it. Brennan's face darkened with anger. "That's a serious accusation, Morrison." "It's a serious situation," Jack replied. "Webb makes me an offer for my land, I refuse, and, suddenly, you show up looking for Apache sign. That's quite a coincidence." "Maybe it's not a coincidence," Martinez said thoughtfully. "Maybe Webb knew something the rest of us didn't." Jack could see doubt beginning to creep into the sheriff's expression. Martinez might be corrupt, but he wasn't stupid. The timing of events was suspicious, and Brennan's eagerness to find evidence was starting to look questionable. But, before anyone could respond, Brennan's tracker called out from about 50 yards away. "Boss! I found something." Everyone rode toward the tracker, who was standing near a cluster of boulders. Jack's heart was racing as he realized they were very close to where Maria was hiding. "What is it?" Brennan demanded. "Fresh campsite," the tracker replied, pointing to a small depression behind the rocks. "Someone spent the night here recently. Indian-style camp, no fire, just a sleeping spot." Jack looked at the area and realized with relief that it wasn't where Maria was hiding. This was probably an old Apache camping spot from years earlier. "Could be from the woman we're looking for," Martinez said. "Or it could be from any traveler passing through," Jack pointed out. "I've seen plenty of people camp in these rocks over the years." But Brennan was already directing his men to search the entire rocky area systematically. It was only a matter of time before they found Maria and Thunderwalker. Jack made a desperate decision. If he was going to act, it had to be now. "Sheriff," he said loudly, "I demand that you arrest Harrison Webb for conspiracy and intimidation." "What?" Martinez asked, clearly surprised. "You heard me," Jack continued, speaking loud enough to distract everyone from the search. "I'm making a formal complaint against Harrison Webb and his men for criminal conspiracy to steal my land." "You can't be serious," Brennan snarled. "Dead serious," Jack replied. "I've got witnesses, I've got evidence, and I've got documentation of threats made against me." This was a complete bluff. Jack had no such evidence. But he was gambling that the boldness of his accusation would confuse the situation long enough for him to figure out what to do next. "Morrison, you're talking about a respected businessman," Martinez said. "I'm talking about a criminal who's using you and your office to commit theft," Jack shot back. The argument might have continued, but it was interrupted by a sound that made everyone freeze, the distinctive war cry of an Apache warrior echoing from the hills above them. Jack looked up to see a figure on horseback silhouetted against the sky on a rocky ridge about a quarter-mile away. Even at that distance, he could tell it was Maria riding Thunderwalker. But something was different. She was dressed in traditional Apache clothing and carrying what looked like a lance. "Jesus Christ," one of the deputies whispered. "It's a war party." "Just one rider," Brennan corrected, but his voice was tense. The figure on the ridge let out another war cry, then disappeared behind the rocks. "She's getting away," Collins shouted, spurring his horse toward the ridge. "Wait!" Martinez called, but Collins was already galloping toward the hills. What happened next was like something out of Jack's childhood nightmares about Apache raids. Collins reached the base of the ridge and started up the rocky slope, but Thunderwalker appeared from a different direction entirely. Maria had somehow circled around behind the deputy without being seen. Collins turned at the sound of hoofbeats, but it was too late. Thunderwalker struck the deputy's horse with his shoulder, sending both horse and rider tumbling down the rocky slope. Collins hit the ground hard and lay still. "Collins!" Martinez shouted, drawing his gun. But Maria and Thunderwalker had already vanished again, disappearing into the maze of rocks and crevices like ghosts. "Spread out!" Brennan ordered his men. "Find her." "Wait a minute," Jack said, thinking quickly. "That wasn't an attack, that was a diversion." "What do you mean?" Martinez asked. "Think about it," Jack explained. "If that woman wanted to hurt Collins, she could have used a weapon. Instead, she just knocked him off his horse. She's trying to draw you away from something." Martinez looked around suspiciously. "Away from what?" I don't know, Jack lied. But maybe we should think about why an Apache woman would deliberately reveal herself to a group of armed lawmen. In truth, Jack understood exactly what Maria was doing. She was creating a diversion to keep the searchers focused on the wrong area while she led them on a wild chase through the hills. It was a classic Apache tactic: use mobility and knowledge of the terrain to frustrate a superior enemy force. She's heading north, one of Brennan's men reported, pointing to dust clouds in the distance. After her, Brennan shouted. But Jack noticed that Martinez was hanging back, looking thoughtful. Sheriff, Jack said quietly, I think you should consider the possibility that you're being played. How so? Webb wants my land, Jack explained. He manufactures evidence of Apache activity to justify a search of my property. During the search, an Apache woman conveniently appears and leads your men on a chase. While you're all focused on catching her, Webb's other men could be doing anything: planting more evidence, sabotaging my property, or worse. Martinez looked at Jack for a long moment. You think this is all a setup? I think the timing is awfully convenient, Jack replied. Before Martinez could respond, they heard gunshots from the hills where Brennan's men were pursuing Maria. The shots were followed by more Apache war cries, this time from multiple directions. Sounds like she's not alone after all, Martinez muttered. But Jack knew better. Maria was using Thunder Walker's speed and agility to appear in multiple locations, creating the illusion of several Apache warriors. It was another classic Apache trick: make the enemy think they're facing a larger force than they actually are. Sheriff, Jack said urgently, we need to check on Collins. They rode to where the deputy had fallen and found him conscious but badly shaken. His horse had an injured leg and couldn't carry him. I never saw anything like it, Collins said as Martinez helped him to his feet. That horse moved like it could read my mind. You're lucky to be alive, Martinez told him. More gunshots echoed from the hills, along with shouts and the sound of horses moving fast over rocky ground. Brennan's boys are having a hard time, Martinez observed. Apache know these hills better than white men, Collins said. They could keep this up all day. Jack was beginning to worry about Maria. She was outnumbered and outgunned, and even Thunder Walker couldn't evade pursuit forever. Sheriff, he said, maybe it's time to call off this search before someone gets killed. Call it off? Martinez asked. We've finally found the Apache we were looking for. Have we? Jack asked. Or have we found exactly what someone wanted us to find? Before Martinez could respond, one of Brennan's men came galloping back from the hills. Sheriff, the man called out. We lost her. Lost her how? Martinez demanded. She led us into a box canyon, then just disappeared, the man replied, clearly frustrated. We searched every inch of that canyon, but there's no sign of her or that horse. Jack wasn't surprised. Maria probably knew a dozen ways out of any canyon in these hills: hidden trails, narrow passages, maybe even caves that connected to other areas. What about the other Apache? Martinez asked. What other Apache? The man replied, confused. We heard war cries from multiple directions, Martinez explained. The man shook his head. Just one woman, Sheriff. But she was moving so fast, appearing and disappearing so quick, it was like fighting ghosts. Jack could see Martinez beginning to understand that they had been outmaneuvered by a single Apache woman and her horse. Round up the men, Martinez ordered. We're heading back to town. What about continuing the search? Brennan demanded as he rode up with the rest of his men. The search is over for today, Martinez replied firmly. We've got an injured deputy and horses that need rest. As they prepared to leave, Brennan approached Jack with a threatening expression. This isn't finished, Morrison, he said quietly. Not by a long shot. No, Jack agreed. I don't suppose it is. After the lawmen and Brennan's men had gone, Jack waited an hour to make sure they weren't coming back. Then, he rode to a predetermined meeting spot, a hidden spring about 3 miles from the ranch where he and Maria had agreed to rendezvous if they got separated. He found Maria there, tending to Thunder Walker's hooves and looking remarkably calm for someone who had just led a dozen armed men on a wild chase through the hills. That was either brilliant or completely insane, Jack told her. Sometimes they are same thing, Maria replied with a slight smile. Apache saying. Are you hurt? Jack asked, examining her for injuries. No, but Thunder Walker is tired. We covered much ground very quickly. Jack looked at the magnificent stallion, who was breathing hard but seemed alert and ready for more action if needed. How did you disappear in that canyon? Jack asked. Apache secret, Maria replied mysteriously. There are paths in these hills that white men do not know. Jack was beginning to understand that Maria's knowledge of the local terrain was far more extensive than he had realized. She didn't just know these hills, she knew them the way an Apache warrior would know them, with every hidden trail and secret passage mapped in her memory. What happens now? Jack asked. Now we move cattle to safe place, Maria replied. Tonight, while Webb's men think we are hiding in hills. And, after that? Maria looked at him seriously. After that, we fight Apache way. We become ghosts in desert, shadows that cannot be caught. Jack realized there was no turning back now. By standing with Maria against the search party, he had committed himself to a path that would make him an outlaw in the eyes of the territorial authorities. But, looking at the woman who had just outmaneuvered a dozen armed men with nothing but her wits and her horse, he felt like he had chosen the right side. All right, he said. Show me these Apache ways. As they prepared to return to the ranch under cover of darkness, Jack reflected on how much his life had changed since he had gone to town looking for a horse. He had found the horse, but, in the process, he had also found something much more valuable, a partner who understood what it meant to fight for survival in an unforgiving land. The war for Jack's ranch was just beginning, but, for the first time since Webb's men had started their campaign of intimidation, Jack felt like he had a chance to win. That night, under a moonless sky, Jack and Maria began the most audacious cattle drive either of them had ever attempted. Moving 30 head of cattle 20 miles through rough desert terrain in complete darkness seemed impossible, but Maria had a plan that drew on generations of Apache survival knowledge. Cattle, they follow leader, she explained as they prepared to move the herd. We just have to convince them Thunder Walker is leader now. It worked better than Jack had dared hope. Thunder Walker seemed to understand exactly what was needed. The stallion moved through the herd with quiet authority, nudging stragglers into line and somehow communicating to the cattle that they should follow him into the darkness. They traveled along ancient Apache trails that Jack never knew existed, paths that wound through hidden valleys and behind rocky ridges where no pursuer could track them. Maria rode Thunder Walker at the front of the herd while Jack brought up the rear on his own horse, watching for any sign of pursuit. How do you know these trails so well? Jack asked during a brief rest. My people traveled these paths for hundreds of years, Maria replied. Before white men came, before borders, before anyone said this land belonged to one person or another. As dawn broke, they reached the hidden canyon Maria had described. Jack was amazed at what he found: a natural fortress surrounded by towering red cliffs, with only one narrow entrance that could easily be defended. Inside the canyon was everything needed for survival: grass for the cattle, a clear spring for water, and caves that could provide shelter. This place is incredible, Jack said as he surveyed their new stronghold. Apache called it Ghost Canyon, Maria explained. Because people who came here sometimes seemed to vanish from world. Over the next few days, they established a hidden camp in the canyon and began preparing for the siege they knew was coming. Maria taught Jack Apache techniques for living off the land, showing him which desert plants could be eaten, how to find water in the driest places, and, most importantly, how to move through hostile territory without being detected. White man fights like bull, she explained as they practiced moving silently across rocky ground. Loud, direct, charging straight at enemy. Apache fights like mountain cat, quiet, patient, striking when enemy is not ready. Jack was a quick learner, but he soon realized how much he had to learn. Apache warfare wasn't just about weapons and tactics, it was about becoming one with the desert environment, using every natural advantage the land could provide. Their peaceful preparation was interrupted on the fourth day when Maria returned from a scouting expedition with disturbing news. "Webb has brought in new men," she reported. "Professional killers from Texas. They are camped outside your ranch, waiting for us to return." Jack felt his stomach tighten. "How many?" "At least 12, maybe more. They have good horses, good weapons, and they know how to track." Jack realized that Webb was escalating the conflict beyond anything he had imagined. These weren't local gunmen or corrupt deputies, these were experienced killers who would have no hesitation about murdering anyone who stood in their way. "What do you think we should do?" Jack asked. Maria was quiet for a long time, studying the terrain around their hidden canyon. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with determination. "We cannot fight them directly," she said. "But we can make them fight desert instead of us." "What do you mean?" "Apache way is to make enemy chase shadows while real threat strikes from different direction," Maria explained. "We make web."